teach our kids and what other people are being brought up to teach their children. And there were pictures of Bin Laden, Hitler, Mein Kampf. All these things were normal things that they came across. And it just struck me, because it could be my children, this age, putting their lives at risk, and what they came back to tell us without complaints, with pride in their country and energy to do all this was just incredible. So this to me was a really special and important day to hear firsthand and hear how they're not broken. And so on our end, it's just for us being that support system, because we are part of their community. It's not just them. And I want to say one more thing. Yesterday, my youngest son and I spent the day in the Holocaust Museum in DC. And our closest friend's daughter is a guide. She's a teenager, and she took a course to be a guide. So she gave us a private tour through the museum. So I'm getting her take as a 17-year-old, and she's telling us all these pieces of what happened and how did it start. And we keep hearing that never again is now, and we hear it like a meme, like it's not important. And you go through that museum, and what are the words that stick out? Propaganda and rallies. Like, it's a playbook that we have to understand that it is happening, and I'm not sure how to fix it, but you put it all together, and we have to kind of listen to the stories and see how we can help each other and see what we can do to get the true stories coming out and make it better for us all. Thank you. Go back one slide,
Karen. Okay, I'm going to talk about Kibbutz Kfar Aza. I'm sure you've all heard of it. Okay. Kfar Aza was a beautiful kibbutz that had 950 residents living together in peace until October 7th. Sorry. 63 men, women, and children were murdered on that early Saturday morning. 6 were severely injured. 19 were kidnapped. 5 remain in Hamas captivity. Almost 10% of the community were either kidnapped or murdered. This kibbutz is less than 2 miles from Gaza. You can clearly see Gaza when looking at the fence enclosing the property. The terrorists rammed through this fence, possibly using an earth mover, which is a bulldozer, clearing the way for dozens of additional gunmen to enter the kibbutz through the breach. They arrived by motorcycles, hang gliders, and trucks with Kalashnikov rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, and hand grenades. It has been estimated that about 70 gunmen entered the kibbutz. This doesn't include the civilian looters who followed and helped themselves to anything and everything they could after the terrorist attack. What shocked me the most is, while I intellectually know and understand it, is seeing just how close Gaza was with my own eyes. This was overwhelming and confusing. The families of Kfar Aza lived literally next to Gazans, trusted them, worked with them, and were friends with them. We heard stories of terrorists sitting in residents' kitchens next to the bodies of the families they had just murdered, eating their food, drinking their drinks, watching their TVs, and calling home to brag about what they had done. Last week, a resident of another kibbutz told me that when she was in her safe room, using a toy bucket with holes in it for a bathroom for her small children, with no electricity or contact with the outside world for 19 hours, she heard women and children in her home ravaging her home. The residents of Kfar Aza were betrayed. Less than 2 miles away, Hamas planned and plotted the murders, rapes and kidnappings of their friends and employers. They burned their homes to the ground, threw grenades, fired too many rounds of ammunition to count, savagely brutalized the women, tortured the elderly, and murdered entire families. Blocks of homes were destroyed. The kibbutz looked like a cross between Kristallnacht and a pogrom. The devastation was overwhelming. The young adult section of the kibbutz was targeted. The terrorists knew where everyone lived, even the dogs. They knew the dogs' names. They studied the kibbutz for years so that they knew where to go, where to do the most damage. In the aftermath, markings were spray painted on homes by Zaka. Zaka is Israel's organization that goes in to rescue, recover, and identify fatal casualties of terrorist attacks, traffic accidents, and other disasters. They are a humanitarian volunteer organization. Can you imagine volunteering to do this? On the homes of Kfar Aza, a circle with a dot indicates body parts inside. A triangle indicates a home has been cleared of human remains. You can see the pictures in front of you. This was so Zaka could later enter the homes to collect as much of the human remains as possible so the victims could be properly buried. The images are ingrained in my mind forever.
I'm going to tell you about the volunteer activities that we did. I'm going to make it brief because the other was a little long. One of the things we volunteered to do was planting, which was pretty funny if you think about it, our planting. And the last thing I planted was poison ivy. No. Well, I reacted to poison ivy, therefore I declared the garden away from me. But this was in Nahalal, where only one worker was left from Southeast Asia. That's it. Everybody else has gone home. So the farmers, they're alone. They needed help. Well, we did. We planted lettuce and melons. It was actually quite exciting to do. And we felt, one of the leaders of this group said it was like praying with your feet. And it was. It was absolutely, we felt we were doing something really important. Aside from the economic part, there's the other part and the spiritual part. And here they have, underneath here are the irrigation pipes. And then we were given a little, it's not a seedling, it's a whatever. You put it in the hole that they already made all the holes. So they made it very easy for us. It was only arduous in that you're, bending down and doing that, but it was actually something. We were there for close to 3 hours, and there's the lettuce pickers. That was the first thing we did. Then, well, it wasn't the first, but that was one of them. We went to a place, where was Hadassah's place? I don't know. What?
Kiryat Gat.
Oh, in Kiryat Gat, we went, not that you'd know it, but I wanted to say it. We helped make, this was an organization that was started by this young woman whose sister was part of our, one of the leaders in our, on our trip, and she called the Real Hadassah. And she is quite something. Her goal is to help the sheroes, the women who are left home with the children and the work and the family, and doing all of that while their husbands are fighting. And so their goal is to make life easier for them. If they need dinners made, they make them dinners, etc. What we did is they had all of the items that we needed to make Purim baskets. And we did. And we wrote notes. So each family got a little note saying, we hope you enjoy this. And it was for the kids, but it was the whole family, and they were beautiful. And it was a very fulfilling thing to do because we knew what joy would bring, because no one wants to even celebrate, and yet they do. That's the spirit that you have to know is there. They are very resilient people. Another day, the family that Dana spoke about was back in all the people that were in the kibbutzim around, and also from the north. They've been evacuated. 150,000 evacuated from the north, because Lebanon there's a big problem there. And also from the south, another, I don't know, maybe 100,000, whatever. When they don't go to their homes, they are put into hotels. The hotels become their homes. So a family of 2 has a room, and a family of 6 has 1 room. And imagine being with your family in 1 room for any length of time. One night, you're hysterical. So this is quite something. So this family was at this hotel in actually right on the beach in Tel Aviv, and the kids one of the banquet rooms became the gan with a little nursery area. The kids went to school. It was very difficult for the children, really difficult, because they would be sent. First, they taught them at the place, then they sent them to another school in Tel Aviv, integrated. Now, these are kids that come from farms, and now they're in the middle of the city with different kinds of kids. I mean, there's a lot of adjustments and a lot of trauma going on. So there, we went to help just brighten the mood, and we worked with the kids, and they made candy, all kinds of candy, fun things to do, and the parents, we were given flowers, and we with them made arrangements, and every room got an arrangement, and so it's really just for morale. Then there was the cooking. So we went to this beautiful, big industrial place where they cook every day the most beautiful meals, full meals, salad, meat, or fish, or vegetarian, because there are so many different kinds. Everything is kosher, so that everybody can eat it. Not that the secular people care, they don't, but it doesn't matter because other people do care. So it's all done under kashrut, and we all chose different things to work with. Of course, I chose dessert, and Dana chose something that wasn't alive once, so she was with the salad. Very proud, even showed, I said, miracles happen here. Dana had a knife in her hand. If you know my Dana, that was quite good. So right away, it was something unusual. For those who don't know, Scott cooks. And that's what we did. Those are all the things that we did there to help and to try to bring joy. And I just want to say one thing very quickly. When we walked in the street, people who didn't know us from a hole in the wall, of course we did have big badges that said who we were, that we were on some group, and they would come up and say, "Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here," all the time. They were so thrilled that we wanted to be with them and support them, and it was, and how brave we were. I didn't feel brave at all. I just felt, of course we're here. This is our family. So that's it.
Hi, I'm Lori Temples. So why I went to Israel, I was walking actually with a congregant in our neighborhood, and I kept talking about how I really feel like I need to do something. I didn't know what it would be yet, but I knew I needed to do something, and she mentioned that she was going on a trip. She's going on a trip that Mark was just on, actually. And that week didn't work for me. My nephew's turning 1. I had to be there, so I was like, whoa, what other trips are available? And I came here, and I watched the #Nova film, and Karen, who I probably hadn't seen 2 years, 3 years, whatever it was, said, "I need a roommate." And I said, "I know what trip I'm going on right now." So, quickly, we coordinated flights. I mean, it was, 3 weeks, maybe, from the time that they were leaving. So I had to, get my work together, get my everything together. And I struggled a little bit with it, to be honest. My youngest daughter was really proud of what I was doing, but was scared, so scared that her mom was going into a war zone. And it was, really gripping at my heart. Do I do something that I feel so passionate about that I may be disappointing my child, or, something could happen to me? I mean, she even said, don't pack any sandals, only pack sneakers in case you have to run. Like, she was that, like, worried about it. But at the end of the day, I felt like this was something I needed to do, and I'm so blessed that I had the opportunity to go. So this person right here, her name is Eliza Landis, probably one of the smartest people you could ever meet. She is with the IDF, the spokesperson for the IDF group, and she has a double master's from MIT and Harvard. So very impressive. She is a lone soldier. She came, I think, from Massachusetts, if I remember correctly. But anyways, she talked to us. I found it really interesting. She talked to us about a lot of the misinformation. She was like, the airdrops you see on TV, that's for TV. She's like, those airdrops for aid doesn't do much. She talked about like the trucks that are coming in. Israel's getting bashed, right, for all the aid, and then unfortunately for killing some of those aid workers. But she talked about, like, up at the top, the reason why aid wasn't going in there was because Hamas blew it up. They had no way to get into that Arab crossing. Egypt, aid's coming in through Egypt, but they're charging $6,000 an aid truck to bring aid in. Israel has an opening for trucks to come in, and they're not even coming in at capacity. So I think just this last Sunday, 322 trucks. I think they have the capacity for 500, but 322 is the highest that has ever come in. As you know, probably you've heard on TV, Biden put a lot of pressure, and so they're reopening the Arab crossing. They're rebuilding it from when Hamas blew it up. The other thing that I thought was kind of interesting, she said, in what other war do you make sure your enemies are fed? So I thought that was an interesting way to look at it. The other thing that I think is really scary is she was talking a lot about Hezbollah to the north, right? She said they're much stronger than Hamas, they're much more intelligent, and they have much more weapons. So something that's going to be really scary from the standpoint of what we're going through now with Hamas. If you can go to the next slide. One of the interesting places they said to follow was Times of Israel website. If you go there, you can see a lot about what's going on. Also, if you want to follow the IDF on Twitter, that way you get real information instead of misinformation. This Gogat is also really interesting. But I'm going to talk a little bit real quickly about when we came back from the Momentum trip. They said, how can you share your experiences, right? We're doing this tonight to let you know. But you guys are already empathetic towards Israel. So how else do we get the word out, right? So one of the things I'm going to do, I'm in cybersecurity, and I sit on a Chief Information Security Officer board here in Atlanta with like 40 other top executives in Atlanta. So I've already talked to them. I was put in connection with somebody that runs the the Southeastern Director for Jewish American community here, as well as the Israeli consulate. And they both have agreed to come. And then I've talked to the content manager, and there's a big CISO gathering in June. And we're going to come and share with everyone what's happening in Israel. We're going to put a cybersecurity spin on it, right? Like, how did they get breached that day? Like, what were the signs that were missed? What were the signs that were there that were ignored? Maybe because of politics, maybe because there were some women that were watching what was going on the radars and saw, stuff happening, and people ignored them. But we're going to talk about all of that. That's a completely non-Jewish community that we can get to. So that's a lot of what they talked about. I went really to volunteer. Bear Witness was kind of like on the side. And now that I've seen it, like, I can communicate it and talk to others, and I talk to others a lot about it. So hopefully you guys will too, and hopefully one day maybe be able to go to Israel as well and bear witness to what we're seeing. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Kopkin. I went on a different trip. They all went on the Momentum trip. I went on a Jewish National Fund trip. Thanks for putting money in the JNF tzedakah boxes. Appreciate that. And actually, I always wondered, do they really plant the trees when you send the money to it? And I actually planted trees in memory of some of the fallen people, so that does exist. So we did some of the same things, and we did several different things, so I'll talk about some of the things that they did not do. First, we went to Beersheba Hospital, which is the largest trauma hospital in southern Israel. In an average day, they get about 12 to 15 major emergencies. Starting on October 7th for 4 weeks, they had a major emergency surgery every 45 seconds. There were a lot of people on vacation. A lot of people from the medical community in that area were on leave for the holiday. They called everybody back. Every doctor and every nurse in that area moved into the hospital, lived in cots for a month, showered at the hospital, ate at the hospital, and they all took 12-hour shifts and just sewed people up and tried to save lives. They operated on anybody and everybody in an attempt to try to save lives. One of the big arguments they had was the chief surgeon there, a Hamas terrorist, came in and he was in bad shape. Had like 13 bullets. He had been hit by a grenade. He was in bad shape. And they said, he's just going to die, let him go. And he said, no. And there was a big argument amongst the doctors there about what do we do? And he said, this is why we're different. We're not going to let him die. Plus, when I save him, we will get intelligence from him. He was in surgery for, I think it was, they said 18 or 19 hours. The IDF took him afterwards, and they captured 41 Hamas terrorists from the information they gathered. It was pretty amazing. I also was part of a security briefing, most of which I can't share, but a couple of things I can. What we all know is the sirens went off at 6:29 that morning, that Saturday morning. What we didn't hear, and they said it was okay to share, is 45 minutes before that, 1,400 Hamas terrorists showed up, and they had this plan in Israel, 3 to 5 miles inside the border. These 1,400 terrorists were in IDF uniforms. Their goal was to take over 2 towns, take down the Israeli flags at the police stations, raise Hamas flags, and put it on social media. That was the plan. In Sderot, there were 50 police officers. They had the names of each of them. They knew exactly where they lived, the names of their pets, everybody in the house. They had floor plans of the homes, floor plans of the police station, and they had killed almost all 50. They had 2 left that they were torturing in the police station, and one Israeli soldier, the only one left at that point, got to a tank and blew up the police station. He said they're not going to take that flag down, and he took out 100 terrorists at that point. At the same exact time that was going on, there's a military base about 3 miles away in southern, right 2 miles from the Gaza border. They attacked that army base. So when we all hear the IDF was asleep at the switch, they may or may not have been. I'm not qualified to say. But they were in the middle of war, and at 6:29, when those sirens went off, and civilians called the police and civilians called that army base, no one answered because they were in hand-to-hand combat. That's something that I had never heard before. It was pretty amazing. So they had this sophisticated plan. Come into Sderot and come into, there's another smaller town, Ofaki, I believe I'm not pronouncing it right. Take over the police stations. They also had the names of every mayor of those towns, all the politicians in those towns. They went to their homes first, and then they were going after the civilians simultaneously. So their goal was to take down the Israeli flag, raise the Hamas flag, and then put on social media, we occupy southern Israel. That was the plan, and then they were going to go to Ashkelon, which is a town of 200,000. Thank God they didn't get there. Met with some IDF soldiers that had just come back from Gaza. A couple of them had been there 2 weeks, a couple of them had been there 4 weeks. And I spoke specifically with 6 young men and women, and they, inspiring is probably all I could say about them. They shared what they did. They said serving in the IDF is not an obligation, it's a privilege. And there wasn't one of them that had not been to less than 21 funerals of their friends and family in that short few period of weeks. So with what they saw, dismemberment, rape, beheading men, animals, pets being killed, babies being stabbed, they're going into harm's way, and they consider it a privilege. And here's the amazing thing. If I were to ask you, what's the name of the Israeli national anthem? What would you say? Hatikva. What's the translation of Hatikva? Hope. Every one of them, to a person, have hope that somehow there will be a better tomorrow and that their family will be able to live in peace by what they're doing. Absolutely amazing that they could feel that way. Our guide said every day the following. So let me get this right. You traveled halfway around the world. You came into a war zone. You're doing manual labor. You're just crazy. Thank you. Thank you. They talked about PTSD, and everybody knows what PTSD is, and that's a big concern for people of all ages there. And then they emphatically said there's no such thing as PTSD for 2 reasons. There's no P. There's no post. They're living in it right now, every day. Someone mentioned, Lori, I think, mentioned Hezbollah and in northern Israel. Half of our group was supposed to go to northern Israel and was not allowed to. 13 towns have been 100% evacuated. Over 100 missiles are coming in every single day into northern Israel. Do you hear it? No. JNF had a mission 10 years ago to relocate 500,000 people to southern Israel near Gaza and 300,000 people north near Lebanon and Syria. So JNF really knows the communities there, and they're just absolutely devastated. We cleaned up towns in southern Israel, getting ready to have people move back, and the kids don't want to go. They just don't want to go into the house that their pet was killed, their dad was killed, their mother was raped. And then you think about something. If I was to ask you, where is the safest place you have in your physical world? How many of you would say your home? A lot of shaking heads, yeah. And you go to sleep for Shabbat, and you wake up to the sound of craziness. Bombs, guns, blood-curdling screams, your pet being killed, your windows being broken, them laughing, and that's going to be your safe place going forward. And the Israelis, to a person, said to me, the way we defeat Hamas is to go back, to move in, to dance, to laugh, and to live. That's the way we're going to do it. And then I was talking with one of the soldiers about history, and we were talking about the Roman Empire and how long did the Roman Empire last? And it's gone. How long did the Ottoman Empire last? It's gone. Israel's still there, and it always will be. One other thought is that they strongly feel that the October 7th massacre definitively will not define who they are. And that if we, as a world jury, do not support them in their time of need, we don't deserve Israel in good times. But they know we're there, and they thanked us for being there. So with that, I'd like to ask Elliot to come up, who also just got back and went on a third group, so you get a totally different perspective. Elliot?
Thank you, Mark. I actually just got back Wednesday night. My trip was planned before October 7th. I had been in Israel 2 years ago riding with the Ramah group, the Ramah camps. I think many of you are familiar. I went to Ramah in Wisconsin. I went to Ramah in Israel when I was growing up. Friends of mine asked me to go on this bike ride with them after not really being part of the Ramah family for many years. And I went 2 years ago, enjoyed myself, and planned to go again the week after Purim of this year. And so when October 7th, and I had my plane ticket, I had everything. When October 7th hit, I didn't do anything. I didn't cancel my flight. I mean, eventually they canceled the trip, but they said, hang on, we might still meet. We just will repurpose it. And that's basically what happened, and that's how I ended up there. And then I ended up staying for 3 extra days and volunteered on my own with an organization called Leket, which is a wonderful organization I can spend a lot of time talking about, but I won't. And I would say I'm still processing. So I kind of, when I heard about this last week in my email, I said, oh, well, I have to be there, but I don't have slides. I don't have written remarks. So I have a few things I do want to say. As far as the IDF is concerned, let's start with that. I had the experience of serving at a barbecue for IDF at one of the bases. It was actually the now rehabilitated base that was overrun by Hamas on October 7th. It's the intelligence base, so it was mostly a lot of intelligence officers, but also combat soldiers were coming in and out. And we got to speak to them. Almost everyone who spoke to a soldier, the main thing that they heard when they said, we're going back to the United States, what message do you want? And the main thing the IDF said to us, I mean, a lot of the things that Mark said, of course, but is we are not murderers. We are not murderers. Tell people we are not murderers. The second thing I want to mention about the IDF, which as a physician, I love to hear. I had dinner with an old colleague of mine in Tel Aviv one night, and he was telling me that we've all been, I don't know how much people realize how surprised everyone is at the lack of deaths in the IDF during this war, okay? Obviously, every death is reported, every death is taken very seriously, but the expected number has been much less than the actual number. And one of the innovations that I think it's something we can be proud of our Israeli army is that they have a new method for taking care of casualties. They actually do immediate surgery on casualties within 10 minutes of being wounded in the field. That is unheard of anywhere in the world in any war that's ever happened. And that's an innovation that the medical people in the IDF, who are primarily reservists in the medical field in Israel, came up with. So I think it's something we can be proud of. Now for maybe a little less positive. I think that, so I want to talk about when I went to Nova too. I want to talk about a couple things when I went to the site of the Nova Festival. First of all, I don't know how many people know, but the Nova Festival took place in the middle. It's actually next to Kibbutz Be'eri, and it's built in a forest that is JNF built trees. So it's actually a forest of JNF planted trees from many, many years ago. And, it's hard to say exactly what effect it had, but what we do know is that the people at the festival, when they were running away, were hiding in that forest that was built with JNF, by JNF, okay? No one's mentioned this. I think it's worth mentioning that approximately 3,000 people attended the festival. Over 300 died, were killed that day. But the other thing was that on Tu B'Shvat this year, they started a new forest where they planted a tree in memory of each one of those 300 victims. And so I was there and I was walking around, and I was the last one on the bus. Everyone was on the bus waiting for me, and I hadn't seen this new area that they had planted in Tu B'Shvat, so I was just wandering around there before getting on the bus. And this man had pulled up in a car, and he was doing something similar to what we heard earlier about putting out pictures or putting out something related to the tree that had been planted in his son's name. His son, you may have heard of him actually, but his son is Ben. His name is Benjamin Shimoni. So my guide came out to tell me it's time to come in, but then I was sort of communicating with this man who was Ben's father, and she started talking to him in Hebrew and asked if he would be willing to talk about his son to everyone on the bus who was on the bus. So we all get back on the bus, and he comes on the bus, and he takes the microphone, and he starts telling the story of his son. His son was at the festival. Hamas came, and everyone started running. He got back to his car along with 8 other people from the festival. He squeezed them all into his car, and he drove approximately 10 kilometers, I think, 10 kilometers, away from where any of this was happening to his father's house or uncle's house, I'm not sure. And he basically deposited these 8 people in safety at this house, got back in his car, went back to the festival, successfully saved more lives, successfully put more people in the car, not sure exactly how many, I think it was somewhere between 5 and 7, went back to this place, dropped them off there, and then as he was there, he gets a call from a coworker a female coworker who he's very good friends with, and she tells him where she's at, and he says, "I'm coming to get you," and he goes to come get her, and both of them were shot down. So this is the father telling that story to us. The other thing was one of my last days there when I was on my own. Ramah had already finished, and I was down in the very south part, almost at the Egyptian border, at a moshav, and I was actually hanging string trellises so that the farmer could later wrap around cherry tomato vines on these string trellises. So that's how I spent my day down there. But he sat us down when we were taking a break and tells the story of what happened. So this moshav was one of the moshavim, I think we all heard about them, one of the moshavim that was able to fool the terrorists into thinking there were more people defending the moshav than were actually defending the moshav. The way he told us the story was basically that if they had just been smart enough to figure out we were fooling them, our whole place would have been overrun, but they didn't, and they left. And then later on, he said that then they had guard duty. They continued guard duty, and they never came back. But they noticed these two or three people in civilian clothes, unarmed, walking across a field towards the neighboring kibbutz. And they went out there, and they were armed, and they went out there, and they basically arrested them and called the police and waited for the police to come pick them up. They were civilians. They were part of this group of civilians that had come over. But in the meantime, while they were waiting for the police to come pick them up, they started talking to them, and what they found out was they said that after the first wave of attacks, basically an announcement went out to all the villages in Gaza. It's okay to go over to Israel and do whatever you want. And they were actually saying that not just whatever you want, like, you can go into the homes and you can get their valuables or you can get their television sets or whatever. No, it was you can do whatever you want. You can kill, you can rape, you can burn. And this is what they were telling the civilians they were welcome to do at this point because Hamas had made it so that they could. So, of course, the farmer who was telling us the story, he called all Gazans animals. He said, it's hard for me to agree with him as a humanist, but I think that, I can understand how he feels. He said, I can't tell the difference between civilians and combatants. I just can't. In my mind, I just can't. And then the last thing I was going to say is that my experiences were similar to what you heard. One of the places that I went to that I wouldn't be surprised if y'all went there too, was to the graveyard literally for all the autos that were burnt out, for all the cars. So you remember all the pictures of all the cars along the road. We went down that, up and down that road. They were all gone. The cars were gone. They had all been taken away. And they, originally, Jewish law said that because there might be, because there might be pieces of human remains in these cars needed to be buried. But then they realized that the environmental impact of burying those cars would have an effect on the local agriculture, a long-term effect on the local agriculture. So the decision was made, for now at least, to pile them up almost like in a junkyard type setting, but this had been made into a memorial. And you could walk around and you could look at all the cars. And, that was tough. I saw a lot of other things. I heard a lot of things, but that was really tough. And for a lot of people, that was tough. For a lot of people in my group, that was tough. And one of the common expressions that people had, emotions that people had, as you can imagine, was anger. There was a lot of anger. Anger about what had happened. Anger about what these cars were a symbol of. Anger of what these cars were a symbol of. And I thought, and I realized, and I articulated it with my group as the week went on, as the trip went on. I think that we have to be careful about anger. I personally believe we have to be careful about anger. I think that a lot of the world thinks that Israel is acting out of anger rather than out of necessity, out of self-defense, out of their, a need for their own security, a need for people to be able to go back to their homes and be safe. And I think that we have to be careful. We have to be witnesses. We have to tell the truth about what happened to people, regardless of what they say. But I think we have to do it out of a sense of necessity and try not to do it out of anger, because unfortunately anger merely reinforces the false narrative that Israel is acting out of anger. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so you heard a lot today, and I guess the question is, what's the call to action? What can you do now? And everywhere we went, you've heard everybody, thank you for coming. You're brave for coming. What do you want us to do? We asked every place we went, and they said, we want you to share our story. We want you to make sure that you tell all of your friends, Jewish, non-Jewish, especially the non-Jewish people, what is actually going on here, and dispel any of the lies that are being told, and there's a lot of them. Lori mentioned, there's several reputable news sources. Try to get your news from there, and don't be afraid to tell your friends when they tell you something, that they're not right, that they need to dig deeper, and really look. So I hope you took away, there were a lot of atrocities there, but as everybody had mentioned up here, there was a lot of joy there too. We visited the same Army base, and we had lunch and serious conversations with these young kids, and then we walked outside and there was a DJ, and they were dancing, and they wanted everybody to dance with them. The boys that we talked about that were just out of Gaza, they actually got out of Gaza that morning, and as somebody had mentioned, they were joyful, and they said there was no place that they would rather be than shoulder to shoulder with their brothers. And the other common thing that we heard was that they're not just doing it for their people, they're doing it for us. They realize how important Israel is to everybody around the world. And so they are dedicated to making Israel a safe space for them, but not just for them, for all of us. So if you can go. I think all of us would say we felt safe there. Things are changing every day, so you have to make a decision for yourself. But we all felt like if they told us it was safe, it was. They told us that if it was not safe, they would also tell us that. And we all felt safe while we were there. So I hope in your lifetime you get to go. I don't know if now's the time, but if you feel the pull, go. They're eternally grateful to us for that. So I think what we'll do now is open it up to any questions. If you have a question for anybody specifically on the panel. Any questions? Thoughts? Yeah.
I don't have any questions. I just want to say thank
thank you for that. Anybody else, any closing thoughts from anybody? Yes.
I forgot to mention, right there, obviously a ton of great books. Noah Tishby's book, Israel, is a good one. This one's pretty interesting, by Yossi Halevi, Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor. He had a Palestinian neighbor, and he just said he hoped that some of these letters could create understanding amongst people with very different lives and thought process. And then also Michael Oren is an author who's doing a world tour right now, and he wrote a book called 2048 about Israel at 100 and what it could look like, and they're all very good. I forgot to mention the Hostage Square, which was a fascinating place right outside Tel Aviv, museum in a courtyard. And one of the most amazing things there is they had a huge Seder table set for the 130-ish hostages. You know, full silverware, china, the whole thing, crystal glasses, the whole thing. And then the next table of 130 was with what they are being told by security these people in captivity are being fed. Water with dirt in it, and soot in it, and spit in it, dirty plates, and things of that sort, and that they will never give up trying to get these people home. It was an amazing experience if you have the opportunity.
So I just want to say one piece to, if anybody wants to donate or do something small today. The girl that we met was 28 years old. At 28, she decided she needed to do something. She was the sister of our madricha, our leader of our group, had 2 little kids. Not only does she do these Shabbat meals for people every week just to do like how to lift them up, they have brought in pizza to Khan Yunis. They have made somebody a soldier for a day and brought in shawarma. They are doing things directly impacting people. So while it's amazing to give to these fantastic groups, this was one-on-one. And all of the money is from her. She's an influencer. So she just does these small collections. You can donate $10 a month, whatever it may be. She's under The Real Hadassah or therealisraeli.org. So it was just a really nice place to know that your money was going directly to someone else, not through a big corporation, and directly to people who need it today.
Well, I would say a couple of things. One is they're so focused on what they're doing that they really didn't talk to us much about what the rest of the world is thinking. But one of the things that we did hear from Eliza was, we asked, well, it's an election year here. President Biden was very, very supportive in the beginning, and his support has kind of waned. And how do you feel about that? And she said to us, don't worry. She said, behind the scenes, it doesn't matter what you hear here. Behind the scenes, they are giving us what we need, and they are our true partners. So that gave us some comfort, I think, as well.
I'd also say, so I've been to Israel one other time. It was about 7 years ago. And I heard the exact same thing this time that I heard before, is it's complicated. That's like their famous word, is it's complicated, because you have such the conservative Jews versus the secular Jews, the politics of the conservative versus, it's the exact same as we're having, right? Like all the politics. But yeah, that's why I think it's so important that we bear witness, right? Because they want to get the correct word out. And Eliza said, because one of the questions I had afterwards, I was so interested in her discussions, but I said, why is the PR just so bad? right? Like, why is the PR so bad from Israel? Like, why are people hearing all these stories that are false? And she admitted, right, that they haven't done as good of a job as they could do on the PR. And then, it's the same thing we're hearing now, right? How many people hear about Ukraine anymore, right? Putin got reelected. He said he's going to continue to bombard Ukraine, and they've been left, right? So the same thing, the stories change. It's whatever is being interesting right now, right? Like the AIDS workers being hurt is what's interesting now. So, it's all of us to tell this truth and tell the story, and that's why they're saying, please go to the correct news sources and let that story be told. Anybody else? You know what? Yeah, but they didn't really touch on I think we're feeling that a lot more, that rise in anti-Semitism. They did say that they acknowledge that anti-Semitism is on the rise.
Some people
In the
feel
US.
like, oh, it's worse where you guys are.
Yeah, they did.
Right, it's worse. And again, at the Holocaust Museum, they talked about who did the book burnings at the beginning. It was the college kids. It's just, and that becomes our future. Those were the people that started the Holocaust book burnings were the people who were some of the high-ranking Nazi officers. So it's something, it hit me hard yesterday of how similar all this is. So the college campuses are a big deal. They see it from their news, but they don't feel, no, they don't feel. They're in their, you know what? They're focusing on themselves. They're not really as worried with the perception. They're more worried about survival.
Right. And really the priority is getting the hostages back. They want their people back, dead or alive, and they are not going to stop until they get their people back. One of the things too, because we did ask about the politics, obviously politics is bad there right now. And they all said, in the uniform, we don't comment on it. We're head down, we're going in. Now things are changing every day, but that's what their mission is, and that's why they rely on us to come. And there were women from Latin America, on our trip, and there were, people from all over the world to come back and share our stories so that we can spread the word.
I think one thing that was interesting that I didn't realize was going to hit me like it did, but the second you get off the airplane and you enter Tel Aviv airport, you are hit with posters and posters and posters of hostages down the hallways. Like, you cannot escape. There's Hostage Square. I don't know if you guys watched the slideshow at the beginning, but like some of this is Hostage Square, but there's makeshift, kind of like 9/11 was, right? Where at the fences there was flowers and there's cards and there's pictures and all of that. There's makeshift memorials all throughout the country. Where people are, writing notes and all of that. So, like, we talk about 9/11, they're talking about October 7th, but there's a different piece of it, is that there's also hostages. We didn't have that. And then they said as a percentage, I didn't mention this, but as a percentage, it would have been equal to 36,000 people being murdered on 9/11.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I didn't even know birthright was going at this
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. 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 Sad. Janet. Yeah.
There was a bunch of,
Yeah.
there was a bunch when we got to the airport.
What was that? Oh, the question was, were there we went with the Jewish women's group, and obviously they didn't go with the women's group, they went with the men's group, but were there Christian groups going as well? And the answer to that is yes.
There's one called Christian
one of the things that we didn't mention, the reason why we were working in the fields is most of the workers were Thai, their workers are Thai workers, and when the war broke out, they sent them all home. And so Israel produces most of their own food, and so that's why we did it. We had a little muddy experience more than Ruthie. Our feet were stuck in the mud, but Lori especially. Lori. Yeah, muddy. But it was great. Yes. Okay. Welcome. Well, thank you. Yes. For Hadassah? Yeah, that's the real Hadassah. What's her website?
It's The Real Hadassah. If you just do a search, that'll come up, or I'll tell you after if you want. Or therealisraeli.org. Right. Is it what?
Oh,
Okay. I'll find it. I'll
we'll give it to you
Yeah,
now.
we'll put
to
it
send
out.
out. We'll put it on the Facebook page, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. Susie? Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So if you go to our Facebook page, it'll be up.
We'll put it on the Facebook.
Yeah. All right, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, there's actually a really good Dennis Prager video, and that we showed, and it's a very simple, is that what you're gonna say? Oh, no, you said.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah, the Dennis Prager video that shows exactly what has happened. And, just for the record, Israel has offered that land many times. And I think the other thing is, the Jewish people, as we've all heard here, we value life above everything. So do we want to see the Palestinians murdered? No, we don't. But we didn't start this war. We didn't ask for this war. But, the sentiment that we got was we're going to finish it. And so, it's sad for them, but they need to make a change to their regime as well. So, yeah. Oh, okay. Well, we are.
I'll just,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to let you know about a program, not a program, but I'm collecting money to purchase night scopes for soldiers in Gaza. Actually, another synagogue that I won't name in Atlanta has purchased a scope. I'll repeat that. Another synagogue in Atlanta has purchased a night scope that I was able to send over to an IDF soldier that I have a relationship with in Gaza. And what the night scopes do is they eliminate blind spots for the soldiers so that they can see. And you're nodding your head, maybe you know about them. But anyway, it's a tactical thing that goes on their gun, and it helps them when they're on the battlefield. And so if anyone is interested in donating, they are not inexpensive, and I would appreciate any help I could get to send the scopes over to them. You can come talk to me after this. Yes? One scope is $1,000, and shipping is not inexpensive either. So please, if you feel, I can't think of the word right now, but yeah, if you're feeling it, come talk to me. Thank you.
So I want to first of all thank all of you for coming, sharing these stories beyond this room, pointing people to our Facebook page, sharing what you heard, is so important to support the state of Israel, both within and outside the Jewish community, especially for our young people. And I want to recognize that we actually have some in the back, two of whom happen to be the children of one of our speakers, but thank you three for being here. And I want to recognize the three of you for coming out tonight as our young people. You can applaud them. I also want to thank all of our speakers tonight for putting this presentation together. It was definitely heart-wrenching and also hopeful. Thank you for bearing witness, for coming back and sharing your stories from the last number of weeks or last number of days. I'm surprised you're awake after getting back on Wednesday. But what they said is true. Donating your time, your efforts, your money to Israel only helps the survival and also the flourishing of the Jewish state. Going there, whether now or in the future, like next year with CDT, is always a great way to connect to Israel, to support Israel, to show how much we care for the state of Israel. And sharing these stories, sharing what's really happening on the ground is vital. It was said multiple times tonight, but get your news from reliable sources. The Times of Israel is one of them. There's other Israeli news sources you can look to. You can talk to me. You can talk to anybody up here, Zahavit, who has access to the variety of Israeli news that is reputable. But I want to thank everyone up here again. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. And once again, Am Yisrael Chai.